Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Leadership Academy podcast. My name's AJ Willoughby. Glad to be back with you all again. The Leadership Academy podcast is brought to you by Titan Media Works. Titan Media Works, they are the easy button for companies and corporations to get into the podcasting industry without all the hassle of the learning curve and production and all that comes along with it. You can check them out, Titan Media Works with an X, WORX.com, and they can help you. So I'll tell you, I am really glad to have our guest today, Ralph Adamo, who's joining us. Ralph is the CEO and founder at Integrity Wealth Management and also a national TV commentator. He's also the author of Integrity at Work. And we're going to be talking a little bit about that in his book there as well today. Ralph, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, AJ, and thanks to your audience for listening in.
So, Ralph, let's just kind of jump right in and let everyone know a little bit about your story briefly and where you started, where you're at, and what it is that you're doing for clients today.
Well, AJ, I'm in the financial services business. This is my near fourth decade. I'm 39 years in practice, going on my 40th year. I feel like I'm halfway through, believe it or not. I try to be a student of my craft, and continuous learning is an important aspect, especially in an evolving economy, an evolving market, an evolving political climate, an evolving government regulatory situation. So it's really interesting, and it's still lively after 40 years nearly.
Yeah, wow. So you've been doing this for quite some time. Tell me about some of the pitfalls and as far as your journey in almost 40 years now, seeing markets go up and down and political changes and the whole atmosphere of everything changing, what have been some of those things you've had to deal with as a leader throughout all this time?
Yeah, oftentimes our clients are looking to us to figure out how to separate fact from fiction, noise from signal, and that's a difficult situation, especially early on in one's career, where we don't have the benefit of the hindsight and haven't lived through some of those experiences. But having lived through a number of those experiences, the wall coming down in Germany and separating Russia essentially east from west, what was going to happen there under that regime, what was going to then happen, and the potential Clinton fallout with the impeachment. The first time a president in my lifetime was being impeached. Now it's more commonplace, it seems. The planes flying into buildings, 9/11, the 2008 financial Great Recession, and then a pandemic. And how do we help our clients in these times of stress? How do we help those individuals face the future with anticipation and not apprehension? Because there's a bucket load of apprehension in every one of those instances about how's it going to affect their lives, their monetary existence, their job in many instances. And so being able to have the benefit of that hindsight has been important. But I will tell you, the initial years, I was in as much a fog as my investor clients and friends and colleagues, trying to navigate, and that was one of those pitfalls, not understanding how things might work out and thinking that the sky is falling and that we are going to collapse and go to zero.
That is
humanity.
That is something that is probably, I know we've gone through so many different things, and there's been times people have questioned that throughout the past, but correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe it's just more on my radar here, just because I hear about it more often. But is it more on the radar of people, what you just said, as far as everything collapsing and what's going to be happening now more than even in the past, with everything between presidential elections and all the other stuff that's going on in our country and all of that that's happening right now. Is that something that's a bigger question now than in the past, or is it kind of no, same story, been there, done that before, and hey, everyone, it's the same ride we've been on all along?
It may have been the same ride that we have been on all along, but I'll tell you, I think you're onto something. I'm not a sociologist. I'm not a counselor or therapist. So in full disclosure, having said all that, my sense is from the fingers I have on the pulse of society and the pulse of my client base, I think folks are more apprehensive. Heck, it's 100 years since we had an outbreak of something that became a pandemic. None of us have lived through that before.
Yeah.
The volume of information and the expedience or accelerated expedience of information and how fast it gets out is also accentuating the agitation and the anxiety that's expressed. We see it, I think, in the numbers from what I can tell, and I guess, and I'm not a big student of all these numbers, but from what I can tell, we have a society that's more anxious and more depressed than ever. And potentially technology moving at the pace it's moving doesn't really have any consideration for how the human brain is really evolving and adapting to that. It's simply going to move along, increase its volume and its accelerated speed and rapidity, and we're all trying to keep up. And it's it's an interesting time. And I think times will continue to be interesting. And for those of your listeners, being able to pierce through the noise and find the signal, being able to pierce through the fiction and finding the facts is what is going to give us maybe a sense of peace, calm, and centeredness. If nothing else, balance and centeredness is important if we can't achieve peace and calm.
All right. So that's a key thing right there that you mentioned, is experiencing that peace, and that comes of dealing with fact versus fiction. And you never know as far as what side of the ropes people are on, or whether they're trying to ride down the middle of it. But with technology the way it is, and with the algorithms that the way that Google works, it really doesn't matter what side you're on. Whatever side you're on, that's what you're going to see the most of, is stuff that supports your views, and which just drives people even more so, because that's what Google's doing to us. That's what the AI, all this stuff is learning how we think and trying to appeal to what it is that our way of thinking. So if we're trying to find things that support our way of thinking, or vice versa, granted, we're going to find it, and it's going to be usually what it is that we're thinking, because those algorithms are generated to align more so with what we are understanding. So how do you determine fact versus fiction in a world with the technology and everything, the craziness that it's doing? How do you do that?
Yeah, I think, AJ, that's a great question. You're hitting on the concept called confirmation bias. Getting information that continues to support what we think is the clear answer. We reference in our subtitle of the book, Integrity at Work, using the integrity process to find financial true north. I bring that up not to plug the book, but to think about how do we find true north in our lives, never mind our finances. That's just one aspect of my profession. But in our lives, how do we find true north? I think we have to be relentless about understanding history. We have to be relentless about understanding human nature. We have to be appreciative that there are going to be poles, a polarity between one side and another, and they can get accentuated and even aggravated to many extents. And so how do we have tolerance? How do we allow for accommodation? And how do we become authentic? I mean, a big part of the reason we call our company Integrity Wealth Management is about becoming authentic to ourselves and authentic to others. And so I think we just have to be open and willing enough to hear the opinions. And at the end of the day, the truth has to come from within. Without
Yeah.
being spiritual and philosophical or religious, we each have to understand our path and above all else be true to thine own self and
Yeah.
make sure that we're giving equal weight to the other thine own selves that are in our lives. Because to have such an opinion that's so abrasive, and even if it might be accurate at the time, but so abrasive that it alienates our fellow brethren and our sisters, it's just not the right outcome, because we are all in this together at the end.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. And I think that you know, coming together and seeing each other and respecting each other's opinions on these matters is important. But like you said, it's having that true understanding of where we do stand for ourselves, that true north. And for those, different people find that, for them, I tend to go closer to the Bible and where it goes as far as myself personally, but still at the same time respecting where other people are standing on that. Let's talk about your book for a moment, Integrity at Work. Uh, Give us a quick rundown of what that book is about.
Yeah, the book was written to uncover or unmask this convoluted notion of what wealth management is. I mean, if you poll 10 folks on what they think wealth management is, you get 10 different answers. Wealth management often is equated to portfolio management or investment management. And yet, what we wanted to do was define the terrain, like what lanes do you drive in, or what pillars do you stand on, or what legs are you plopped on top of, that actually incorporate true wealth management, because wealth management to me is a term that means comprehensive financial advice. And so in the book, what we attempted to do was delineate and define the terrain and territory of what wealth management is. And what we've concluded in our work and in our processes is that there's 7 or 8 lanes that you need to be driving in or operating in if you're going to be doing comprehensive wealth management for yourself or as a professional for others. And it incorporated all sides of the balance sheet, not just the investment side of the assets, but the debt side of the balance sheet. It incorporated a special awareness about tax issues, risk management issues, estate and legacy issues. It incorporates philanthropic issues. And those pieces all need to be blended together. And I believe the professional or the individual who's trying to achieve a optimal outcome needs to move between those lanes with great speed and agility. Because what we do in our tax planning, it has implications to how we invest, and how we invest has implications back to our tax plan. How we insure ourselves has implications back to our estate planning. So we have to understand that there are crossovers between each of these lanes, and that there's no isolated dial to turn, but once you turn one dial, those gears are meshed and will move the other dials more likely than not. And being able to calibrate those dials simultaneously is what I think comprehensive wealth management's about. And that was the goal of the book. Behind that goal, kind of the subset of the goal, was to give an expose on 2 things. One, integrity at work is kind of a double entendre. Integrity wealth management at work. What is integrity wealth management doing? So kind of a corporate brochure. We got an opportunity to print a book and tell our story from the inside out, giving an expose of what it is we do here and how we do it. And the second one was to also put on in a spotlight the principle of integrity, not just in the relationship with your financial advisor, but also the importance of that principle in life and just how it plays out. So that was the goal of the book.
So as far as the book and the concepts and everything that's within it, first question, I'm assuming this is something that is cross state, all the wisdom and everything that comes from the book. It's not specific to tax standards that are specific to one specific state or anything like that. It's financial kind of wisdom that is abroad. My first assumption.
It's meant to be a broad stroke. It wasn't to get to the granularity of each state-specific tax code. It was understanding those terms and understanding there's an integration between these lanes. That was the most important. Chapter 8 in the book gives a 25-question checklist. Essentially, what we wanted to provide folks is a roadmap or a checklist for them to find their financial true north in understanding, is the advice I'm getting now either giving it to myself as a do-it-yourselfer or the advice that I'm receiving from my advisory firm, is it in fact comprehensive, and how do I know that? So we provided a 25-question checklist to be able to decipher, is in fact the preponderance of the processes and the planning comprehensive in its nature, and this would help that individual, that layperson, distill true north in terms of comprehensive wealth management versus what might be limited scoped advice.
So when you're talking 7 to 8 lanes, are we talking different business ventures? Are you talking different financial investments, or something totally different when you're talking lanes?
Yeah, so let me define those pillars, those lanes. Portfolio management is a lane that we believe, or a pillar that is a strong component of wealth management. What are you doing with your investment portfolio? How are you building it? How are you deploying it? How are you monitoring it and maintaining it? What are the tax implications rolling off? So tax awareness is now the second lane one has to play in. Think about the asset side of a balance sheet. That's probably our investments, our home, other properties. And then it rolls into the debt side. Do we have debt? Whether it's credit card, mortgage debt, other personal lines of credit. How are we managing debt? Debt could be a powerful leveraging tool, but it also could be an instrument of potential catastrophe. So we have to be honest with ourselves about our debt. So that's 3 lanes so far. You've got the portfolio management lane. You have the tax awareness lane. You've got the debt analysis lane. The fourth one you get into for most folks of modest to somewhat larger means without being super large. Their folks are concerned about how do they develop the most rational income plan. You know, people are living longer than ever and are retiring for longer times than ever in durations. It's known that today, statistically, under the old census, I suspect it's even longer, but a couple that's retiring at 65, there's a 1 in 2 chance, pretty much a 1 in 2 chance that one of them is going to live to 95, which means it's a 30-year time horizon. If they've retired at 65, no longer are they going to work for money. Their money is going to work for money. And how do you get money to last for 3 decades successfully? Yeah. To do that, you have to have some rational income design. So a 4th lane is about income design. A 5th lane is about risk management. Risk management might be the proper integration of your automobile, homeowners, and excess liability, or sometimes referred to as umbrella policies, and the limits. Do we have those coordinated? I'm not a licensed property and casualty agent, but I have a keen eye for recruiting in the licensed professionals to make sure we get a second opinion and review these items on behalf of our clients. Risk management might have to do with not living well enough and becoming disabled, or requirements for long-term care facilities. Do we keep that risk internally, or do we sell that risk off to an insurance company by paying a premium and qualifying for coverage? Do we have the potential for not living long enough? And if we don't live long enough, we might leave those behind unequipped financially to deal with their future. And so life insurance is one of those tools that helps in those instances. So risk management is a spectrum of tools that you decide whether do we keep the risk internally. It's not like the risk isn't there, that one could die prematurely or one could get injured or ill prematurely. That risk is always there. It's whether or not we want to own the risk and resolve it with our own wallet, or do we want to offload that risk and give it to an insurance company for an exchange of a premium in a contract called a policy. So we've got to evaluate that risk management criteria and the tool sets and decide whether or not we take the risk and own it ourselves, or we sell part of it off, or we sell most or all of it off and resolve it that way. So moving to the next lane is about legacy and estate planning. And I think the difference between estate transfer planning, which is the transition of valuables between generations, I think the legacy planning is the transition of value systems between generations. See, the successful folks in this world, and we know that's the minority, have learned certain things, and success leaves clues. What are some of those clues? What are some of those breadcrumbs and trails that we should follow? Well, an individual who has developed a successful household, and I don't mean just financially, I mean a well-integrated environment. And for most of us, that's that family core unit, regardless if it's same sex, same gender or not. But that family core unit, there's certain things a successful first generation has done. And oftentimes the second and third generation did not pick up on those clues because grandmom and granddad did not articulate exactly what it was that they do. But gosh, if they could define what it is they do and how they think, it could help generation 2 and generation 3. There's that old saying, shirt sleeves in 3 generations. In other words, people make a fortune or a good sum of money in generation 1. By generation 3, it's all gone. And you wonder how that happened. Well, it's the activities and behaviors of generation 3 that dissipated that wealth that they inherited. They never understood what it took to be enterprising and industrious, more likely than not, and how that money was saved and how that money was grown and the disciplines it takes. We naturally all would like to shy away from being disciplined. Who likes to be put in a box and conform to things? Rarely. It is the person who's created those habits and those disciplines that actually exceeds. That's why it's the minority of folks. Somewhere between 4 and 5% of people achieve. And what they achieve sometimes drowns out the other 95% with their successes because of all that achievement and discipline. But that discipline, there's a saying that discipline lasts long after the excitement of the moment. Many of us get warmed up in the excitement of the moment, but we forget that there's habits and disciplines that have to come into place to follow that. Now, I'll close with this, or at least I'll end this little segment here. Jackie Cooper, he was a sales trainer, believe it or not, but he had the wisdom of some philosophers. And he said in a very simple but convoluted, compounded sentence, he said, it's the things that we do that we don't have to do that will always determine the difference when it's too late to do anything about it. It's almost worth repeating, right?
Yeah.
It's all those things that we don't have to do that, gosh, if we just did them, that will determine and make all the difference in the end.
So question, everything that you're talking about, the lanes and the disciplines, is all this addressed in your book?
It is, AJ. It absolutely is. Yes.
And all the disciplines as far as, hey, this is what the wealthy do and this is what they're doing. That's all addressed.
We do our best to try to provide both a modest household's aspirations as well as a wealthy household's aspirations. So it drives across all the spectrums of wealth. We're not talking about the super wealthy who could pretty much blow money and it doesn't much matter because their funds are growing at such a pace that they couldn't possibly consume it in their own lifetime.
Yeah. So written for the majority of the people that are out there to be able to learn from. Oh, that's great. All right. So I've got 2 final questions. One is, and this, and I realize may be a little bit of an expanded answer, Arn, that is taking some of the risks and looking at investments and entrepreneurs starting businesses and people that are trying to figure out, their future, referring back to what we kind of talked about at the very beginning with the fact that, hey, this is such a time in our lives where there are so many unknowns and, trying to figure out, well, hey, is everything going to go belly up, or is everything going to be, hey, this is just another bump in the road? Don't worry about it. We're all moving forward there. How do people make some of those decisions as far as, without getting into giving financial advice here?
Sure.
How do they
Yeah.
make some of those decisions as far as, hey, I want to start a business? Well, do I look for the big business idea, or do I need to be looking at several small wins? Let's do several businesses that are going to be making a difference and diversify everything across. Do the same thing with our investments, or what? What is the answer to that?
Well, I know my inclination. I would suggest that the individual consider what their strengths are and what their propensities are. Some folks are gifted with understanding corporate structure and are able to build large firms. Others are far more entrepreneurial and are solo virtuosos and can launch something from the ground up from their own garage, but don't let them get into a corporate boardroom because that's not their strength and their talents.
Yeah.
For most of us, I think it's the latter. That latter, being able to start and initiate some concept that resonates for us, that fills a need for our fellow humanity. If we can start there, that will give us, I think, the barometer as to where we go from there. So it's starting, and I think you're correct, is get a win under your belt. You can get a win under your belt. I know when I started in this profession, the first 5 to 7 years were a fog. I had to find clients, then I had to apply skills that I barely knew to the clients. And I'm so grateful for those clients that hung in there while I was learning both my interpersonal skills as well as my professional skills. Because sometimes you can possess all the professional skills, but if you can't articulate it and you can't motivate a client to move forward on something, you really don't have a success happening. You can be so good proficiently in terms of your profession and so lousy in terms of being able to share that knowledge to get someone to act on it. And then there's some folks that are so good at getting folks to act on things, but barely have any of the knowledge. And those people work.
Yeah.
Lord knows what advice they're giving and what it's predicated on and whether or not it's sound principles or not. But as long as the client's moving forward, in their opinion, things are good. But who knows what forward, because they might not be going towards true north financially at all. So I think it's important we start. I always have said to my clients and to my colleagues, the 4 most important letters in the English language are START. And people would look at me, but that's 5 letters. I said, no, T's 1. Now you remember, start. Just start. Start and then stick to it with discipline. Because it'll be the things you do that you don't have to do that will determine the difference. But it's too late.
Is there a way to recession-proof what we're going into, or as far as our businesses with the world today?
Well, I think one of the most important things, recession slowed down in the faucet of cash flow. And that threatens those businesses who rely on their cash flow to survive. You look at Warren Buffett and you see the arsenal of reserves that he has. And during the 2008, it's a perfect example. You had Goldman Sachs that was hemorrhaging with cash. And they were suffering. Warren Buffett lends them $5 billion with some warrants, and ends up controlling a good portion of their upside success when they come back. He believed in the possibility of their success and the probability of their success, but because they didn't manage themselves sufficiently with their cash on hand, they couldn't weather the storm and had to go to an external resource. Fortunately, they had enough credibility on the street that a Warren Buffett stepped in when the conventional banking system was breaking down. So for us to become a little more impervious and a little bit more insulated, having cash on hand is really important. It is king in instances when we see external financial collapse happening around us. Now, external financial collapse happens in degrees, but I don't believe it's going to happen to drop to zero. I don't think that Jubilee event is going to happen. Why? Because each of us is going to work. Each of us is working to figure out solutions during those times, and each of us is expanding in our knowledge base all the time. So I have a faith in humanity that despite contractions and the inevitable expansions and contraction cycle, we are going to have continuous rise. I mean, one of our pundits in our industry is a fellow named Nick Murray, and Nick Murray would always say, declines are temporary and advances are permanent. If you look at a chart, the only thing that squares with history is that saying that declines are temporary and advances are permanent. If you go back and look at the charts wherever they start, they all are up significantly despite everything that's happened. World War I, World War II, Korean War, Vietnam, on and on and on, the Cuban Missile Crisis, the resignation of Richard Nixon, the impeachment, the wall coming down in Berlin, one thing after the other, planes going into war, the invasion of Iraq, my gosh, Afghanistan, one after the other, and yet we still, as a species, have continued to advance. So unless we completely collapse in terms of existence, I think we will continue to advance.
You know, I realize we've gone a little bit longer than normal here, and to be honest, this could continue on. I got so many things going through my head of questions I would want to ask, but I realize we're running out of time. So let me end with asking this, and that is, in your journey from where you're at today, from where you started, if there was one piece of advice that you wish that you would have taken at the very beginning that would have changed the trajectory or sped up or helped or whatever that you know now that you could give, that had you had this at the very beginning when you had things be a little bit different or further along, what would that advice be?
Well, surround yourself with the right people. Now, my definition of the right people isn't always the brightest of people, although bright people are very good colleagues to have around. I would say check in, listen in for the barometer of integrity. Surround yourself with people of integrity that understand the fabric of humanity, that we're all one, and that we're all trying to do good. And tearing at the fabric in any minor way or major way will only set us back sooner or later. So surrounding oneself with people of integrity and that principle will make all the difference in the world in the end. Yeah, regardless of how high you climb or desire to climb.
That is great advice. That really is. Well, our guest today has been Ralph Adamo. He also the author of the book, Integrity at Work. Ralph, the best way for them to get the book is what way?
Well, I'll give your listeners a little bit of insight. One, if you'd like to get a synopsis of the book without having to lay out $1, simply go to our book's website, Integrity at Work. Integrity fully spelled out, A-T for at, and then W-O-R-K for work. No punctuation, integrityatwork.com. We summarize each of the chapters in there. I do a video on each of the important chapters in there, giving you a little bit more summary and the visual aspects of it. I think that's a great starter. The book is available on all of the popular platforms, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the book sites that are out there. It's available in hardcover, it's available in paperback, and soon will be available in Audible.
Oh, that's great. And if people wanted information about you, wanted to ask you some more questions about financial, where would they go?
Well, I think the best place would be to start at our company's website, integrityIWM.com. So that's integrity fully spelled out, the initial I for integrity, the initial W for wealth, the initial M for management.com. There is for sure a place to pose questions. There's for sure a matter in which you could set a time. Bear in mind, depending on where you're located, I may or may not be able to speak with you professionally about those topics. But from a personal point of view, I'm happy to talk to anybody who's one of your listeners about some of the philosophies and the approaches to business that we take. But when it comes to their financial management and their financial advice, I may be prohibited because I might not be registered or licensed in their specific state, which would be necessary to have that kind of detailed conversation. So that one disclosure is important.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, you've been listening to the Leadership Academy podcast with our host, our guest today, Ralph Adamo. And this has been a really, really educational episode. And Ralph, I appreciate you being on the show with us today. I know you do a lot of stuff. You're TV commentator. You do all kinds of things. You've been around for a while, so I appreciate you taking the time out for us.
I appreciate being on board with you. It was a delight. You're a wonderful host, and I hope your listeners took away some valuable gems and jewels from the conversation.
Absolutely.
My pleasure.
Again, the Leadership Academy podcast brought to you by Titan Media Works. If you are looking to get into the podcasting world, they can help you out. They'll make it easy for you without any of the hassles of having to do the production, the editing, the getting things up on the internet. They take care of it all for you, and you can check them out. Titan Media Works with an X, WORX.com, and they can help you. Until next time, you all have a great day.
The information presented in this program is provided for informational purposes only. The information is believed to be reliable, but no guarantee of accuracy is made or implied. Expressions of opinion are as of this date and are subject to change without notice. The information in this material is not intended as tax or legal advice. Please consult legal or tax professionals for specific information regarding your individual situation. This information does not constitute a solicitation or an offer to buy or sell any security. Investing involves risk, excluding the possible loss of principal. Ralph Adamo is registered with the securities and are offered through Kovac Securities, Inc., member FINRA, SIPC 6415, North Federal Highway, Suite 1201, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, 33308. Telephone number 954-782-4771. Investment advisory services are offered through Kovac Advisors, Inc. Integrity Wealth Management is not affiliated with Kovac Securities, Inc. or Kovac Advisors, Inc.